I never imagined that a small disagreement with a neighbor could spiral into the kind of chaos that ends with someone in handcuffs. But that's exactly how things unraveled when HOA Karen's son decided to make my car his latest target. The first time I saw that scratch, a chill ran straight through me. This wasn't some harmless teenage prank. It was deliberate, personal, mean. And I had no idea at the time that it was only the beginning of something much bigger. It started on a calm Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from a grocery run, parked my car in the driveway, and was enjoying the peaceful quiet of the neighborhood. Birds were chirping, a few lawnmowers hummed in the distance. Everything felt normal. Until I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. There he was, HOA Karen's son. 16, cocky, and notorious for trouble. I'd heard stories from other neighbors. Property damage, noise complaints, petty theft, and now he was pacing near my car like a wolf eyeing its prey. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to call out or stay quiet, but instinct told me to watch. Then I saw it, the glint of metal in his hand. My stomach dropped. Before I could react, he dragged it across the hood of my car, carving a jagged line that cut straight through the paint. The screech of metal against metal felt like nails on a chalkboard. I shouted his name, but he only froze for a split second before bolting across the lawn. My heart was pounding as I grabbed my phone and called 911. I tried to sound calm for the dispatcher, describing what happened, but my hands were shaking. And that's when she appeared, HOA Karen herself, storming out of her house, red-faced and shouting at me to mind my own business. Her tone was sharp, defensive, and full of false authority. I ignored her, keeping my eyes on her son, who was now lingering nearby like he knew his mom's arrival had turned the tide in his favor. What made this infuriating was that this wasn't the first time he'd caused trouble. Other neighbors had filed complaints. There were written warnings. Nothing had changed. And now, my car was his latest victim. I kept the dispatcher on the line, reporting every detail. My pulse was racing, my breath uneven, but I wasn't backing down. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug like all the other incidents. As I spoke, I could hear the faint wail of sirens in the distance. The sound grew louder, fast. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights reflected off nearby houses. My chest tightened. This was it. The moment things would finally come to a head. The police pulled up quickly, their lights casting streaks across the quiet street. Karen immediately jumped into action, waving her hands and yelling that it was all a misunderstanding, that her son didn't mean it. But the officers didn't buy it. They saw the damage on my car, deep, fresh, undeniable. The metallic dust still glimmered in the afternoon light. This wasn't accidental. It was vandalism. Karen's son looked frozen, truly frozen, for the first time. His arrogance vanished, replaced with panic as an officer calmly told him to step away from the car. He hesitated, then reached for the door handle like he might run. Bad idea. One of the officers stepped forward, blocking his path, and took hold of his arm with firm authority. The kid struggled for a second, but it was pointless. Within moments, his hands were cuffed behind his back. His protests, the classic "I didn't mean to," were drowned out by the officer's steady, professional tone. Karen's expression twisted from disbelief to pure outrage. She began screaming at the officers, accusing them of targeting her son, but they stayed focused, documenting everything. I stood there, silent, my adrenaline mixing with a strange sense of relief. After months of dealing with her family's chaos, justice, real, tangible justice, was finally happening. Neighbors began peeking out from their windows, drawn by the flashing lights and shouting. Whispers spread quickly. People pointed, murmured, shook their heads. A few gave me subtle nods of support. It was clear. This wasn't just about my car anymore. It was about accountability. The officers read the boy his rights as Karen's shouting turned hoarse. Even through her anger, I could see it. The dawning realization that her son's behavior had gone too far. There was no talking her way out of this one. As the police led him toward the cruiser, I felt something shift. The neighborhood had seen the truth with their own eyes, and there would be no more pretending. I walked back to my car, tracing the scratches with my fingertips. They were deep, painful to look at, but knowing the culprit was finally being held responsible gave me a strange, quiet satisfaction. Still, deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly, and I had a strong feeling her revenge was already in motion. The neighborhood had just witnessed a rare moment of justice, but between me and Karen, the war was far from over. Beneath the calm surface, I could feel the tension coiling tighter, like a storm waiting to break. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It had become a battle of nerve, patience, and survival in a suburban Cold War. After the police drove away with her son, the street fell eerily silent. No birds, no laughter, just that suffocating quiet that follows chaos. I could sense her eyes burning into me from across the yard, her body stiff, jaw clenched tight. She was furious, powerless for now, but that only made her more dangerous. I knew Karen well enough to understand that she wouldn't let this go without a fight. I went inside, trying to calm down, but every sound outside made my pulse jump. A car door slamming, a dog barking, everything felt like a threat. Karen had friends on the HOA board, and she had a reputation for making life miserable for anyone who crossed her. But this time, things were different. There were witnesses, a police report, and my 911 recording. For once, the truth was on my side, and that gave me strength. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my front door. Just one short, sharp message written in angry, looping handwriting. "You think this is over? You'll regret humiliating my family. Watch your car!" My stomach dropped, but then something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to be intimidated. Her threats were a desperate attempt to regain control, and I wasn't about to hand that power back. I photographed the note, saved copies, and forwarded everything to the police. Then I documented every inch of my car again, just in case. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the neighborhood changed. People whispered on sidewalks and at mailboxes. Some neighbors offered quiet sympathy. Others asked questions, and a few admitted they'd been too scared to speak up about Karen before. The illusion of her control was cracking. Still, strange little incidents started happening. A dent in my mailbox, tire marks creeping too close to my driveway, faint noises outside late at night. Petty but unnerving. Karen was trying to scare me, even without her son. Midweek, the HOA announced an emergency meeting. I knew exactly who had called it. Karen. I went prepared, expecting her to twist the story. Sure enough, she stood before the room and painted herself as the victim, claiming her son was misunderstood and that I'd overreacted. But her words fell flat. The police report, the photos, and the eyewitnesses told a different story, one that couldn't be spun away. I stayed composed while she grew visibly frustrated, her voice cracking under the weight of her own lies. When the meeting ended, the verdict was clear. Karen's credibility had been destroyed. Her neighbors, the same ones she used to bully, were finally seeing her for what she was. And for once, I wasn't the one being whispered about in disapproval. I was the one who stood up to her. But victory didn't mean safety. Karen wasn't the kind to accept humiliation easily. She moved through the neighborhood like a thundercloud, silent, heavy, waiting to strike. I kept watch every night, double-checking my locks, keeping my phone nearby. The logic in my head said it was over, but my gut told me it wasn't, and I was right. A few afternoons later, I stepped outside to check the mail, and froze. Karen's son was back. He was standing in my driveway, glancing around nervously, a small metal object clutched in his hand. My stomach twisted. He looked both scared and defiant, like someone daring the world to stop him. Before I could shout, he lunged at my car, dragging the object hard against the side panel. The screech of metal tore through the air. I grabbed my phone and called 911 immediately, my voice steady this time. I'd learned from before, no panic, just action. I described everything as it happened, eyes fixed on the boy still scratching away like he wanted to prove something. Karen appeared seconds later, screaming at him to stop, but her voice was laced with desperation, not authority. Then came the sound that ended it all. Sirens. Police cars roared down the street, tires screeching as they blocked both ends of the road. The boy froze mid-motion, fear washing over his face as the officers moved in. They didn't hesitate. Within moments, he was restrained, cuffed, and silent. The reality of what he'd done, again, had finally hit him. Karen stood there, stunned. The outrage in her eyes flickered into disbelief, then helplessness. There were no excuses left, no neighbors she could manipulate, no lies that could undo what everyone had just seen. The officers documented the new damage, filed a second report, and escorted her son back to the patrol car. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The neighborhood had already drawn its conclusions. People watched from porches and driveways, their murmurs carrying down the street. For the first time, I saw something new in their expressions. Not just sympathy, but respect. Later that evening, I walked around my driveway, running my hand over the new scratches. They were deep, ugly, permanent, but I didn't feel anger anymore. Just relief. They were marks of defiance, yes, but also of endurance. Proof that I'd stood my ground and refused to be bullied into silence. Karen had tried to break me, to make me fold under fear, but instead she'd lost everything. Her influence, her control, and the illusion of power she'd clung to for years. Her son was now facing real legal consequences, and the neighborhood had finally found its voice. The tension slowly began to fade. For the first time in months, I could park my car without looking over my shoulder. I could breathe. I could walk outside and feel peace instead of anxiety. Karen still lived across the street, of course. Still bitter. Still angry. But something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't untouchable anymore. And though I knew she might never stop trying to stir trouble, I also knew one simple truth. This time she'd lost. Completely. The scratches on my car would fade with time. But the victory, that quiet, hard-earned victory, would last far longer.